Hello, everybody, and welcome to Realty Success. We're so excited to have you today. My name is Brooke Bryant. I'm a realtor in the Charlotte, North Carolina area, and I'm with you here weekly for the Realty Success Show. And along with us, we have a very special guest today coming to us from New York City. We're so happy to have Adie Kriegstein, and she runs a team in New York City and is going to talk to us today about red flags when working with real estate agents. So we're going to go around the room and introduce everybody, and we're going to start with you, our special guest today, Adie. If you please say hello to everyone.
Well, thank you, Brooke. It's such a pleasure to be on your show for one. I really am just overjoyed. As you mentioned, I'm a real estate agent in New York City. I've been selling real estate for about 18 years. My team is NYC Experience Team here at Compass in the city, and we sell properties all over the city and in Brooklyn.
We're so excited to have you with us and can't wait to dig into the topic. Also with us today, we have Regina Brown. Regina, would you please jump on in and tell everybody about yourself?
Absolutely. I'm Regina Brown. I am from San Antonio, Texas. I specialize in the luxury market. So anyone headed to San Antonio, Texas, please go ahead and contact me, reginaBrealty@gmail.com.
Thanks so much, Regina. We look forward to hearing from you today. And then also we have Angela Brown, our cleaning specialist. And we're so excited to have you chime in with us. Angela, if you'd say hello to everyone.
Well, hello, everyone. It's good to see you guys. I am Angela Brown. You can find me on all the social medias at Ask Angela Brown. I am the move-in, move-out part of the cleaning and the buying and selling a home. So this is the ultimate guide to move in, move out cleaning for homeowners. So if you are moving, pick up a copy. It's a chance for you to save a whole lot of money from hiring a professional. Okay, because we all know that a transaction does not happen in the real estate industry until your place looks fantastic. All right, I'm super excited to be here today. So thank you, Brooke and Regina and Adie for having me here.
Thanks so much, Angela. So let's get started. Adie, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and how your career in real estate began?
Absolutely. So I began straight out of college, and I know that's a very unusual profession for someone to get into right out of college. Normally it's a second or a third career, and I, jumped in straight out of college in 2005, and it was kind of a sink or swim mentality. And I figured there was no other place to do it but New York. If I could make it in New York, I could take those skills and do it anywhere. So I came to the city and didn't think I would stay, to be totally honest. I didn't think I would stay, and here it is 18 years later, and I can't imagine being anywhere else. So I have a team of 5 people here in the city, and again, as mentioned, we sell properties throughout the city, anything from studio apartments up to townhouses, both in the city and in Brooklyn. A little bit about myself. I dig dinosaurs as a hobby. Yes, I know that sounds a little bit unusual, but it is a passion of mine, and I've been doing it since I was 13. And I'm also an avid scuba diver, and I'm very involved in my condominium board, as well as I do a lot with pets in the city. I have a white lab currently, and in the past we've volunteered at hospitals and other facilities throughout the city as well as a way to give back. And as such, I'm very much involved in a number of different organizations related to pets in the city.
Oh, that's
I have
fantastic.
so many questions about all of that. So many questions. So you've only worked in the New York City market?
Correct. Came to the city, fell in love with it, and haven't left since.
That's great.
So my question is, have you found that New York is comparable to other markets, or is there something unique about New York City that would make you just want to stay? Is that the only market or would you say it's comparable to other markets right now?
Wonderful question. Definitely the velocity at which it moves at is comparable to a number of other markets, like the larger urban settings throughout the country, as well as the liquidity, right? New York just happens to be a very liquid city, given it attracts so many people from around the world. That being said, we are a market unlike others for a number of different reasons, but the most important and most distinguishable is we don't have an MLS. It's like the Wild West when I tell this to other brokers. Every other place in the country has an official MLS. We do not have one. We have a faux MLS. So you really have to get to know the intricacies, not just of the market, which again can vary month to month, and you need to, of course, keep a pulse on that, but you need to be able to, service your client. And what I mean by that, for instance, is here in the city, we dominantly have two different types of buildings. If you remove all of the rental buildings and all the commercial buildings, what you're left with are residential buildings that are either condos or co-ops. Mm-hmm. And I'm sure you're scratching your head, what is a co-op? I've heard of a farm co-op, right? Can I get some eggs or something? No, this is very different, yet similar in the principle. So in a co-op, you don't necessarily own the property outright in the way that you're thinking. You own shares within the corporation. The shares assigned to the unit, you get a stock and lease upon purchase within the overall building. So to take that a step further and make it even more complicated is that no two buildings are really the same. They have restrictions and guidelines on what you can finance, how much financing they will allow, debt to income ratio, whether or not you can sublet your home, and if so, what are the restrictions and guidelines around that. Pets are an interesting one. Also, no LLCs and no trusts are typically allowed in these buildings, as well as foreign purchasers. So you need to be able, as a broker, to know what those building requirements are, because you have to prepare a very arduous board package and then present your client as a potential, shareholder to the building. And they have to go through a board interview after that whole package has been reviewed. So it's a high-paced, liquid market with a lot of knowledge that one has to retain. And as such, for me, it keeps me on my feet. I find it incredibly interesting. And it's a very challenging market to work and excel at. You can imagine a number of brokers come into this industry. Again, it's, second, third, fourth profession, and they just don't last because it's very hard to make it here because of all these nuances. And I'm not saying other areas are that much easier, but without an MLS and say one type of building code, it's a lot of information to be able to gather and to hold, frankly.
Well, as a realtor, and as I said, in Charlotte, North Carolina, that just sounds so foreign to me, that whole concept. But it also sounds to me that it is vital for clients to find an agent, a realtor, a real estate professional who is well-versed in all of that and has a lot of experience, maybe more so than in other markets. Real estate transactions vary from, nothing's ever the same from one transaction to another, but yours sounds even more nuanced. So it really is vital for your clients to find an agent that they can count on and trust.
It absolutely is. And the old saying, when your agent really needs to be your therapist, your sibling, your parent, your this, your that, all in one. And then you throw this kind of wrench into the situation, and it's a lot. You need to be able to have a strong relationship of trust as well with this agent, because they are going to be with you, and more than just with you through the process, they literally will see all of your finances, because you can't withhold anything either. At least if you want to go in the direction, say, of a co-op. So in our marketplace, it is definitely essential to have a broker that's working with you, where they're taking on, all of the fiduciary responsibilities to putting you out there in the best possible situation for purchasing, that is not just, oh, hey, this is the home I want to buy, but let's get you through the board so you can move in and enjoy that home and not waste 5 months.
Yeah. So what is the process from start to finish? What's the timeline like for a buyer looking to purchase in a co-op?
It's a wonderful question. From start to finish, you're looking at about 3 to 4 months. Now that can change, and that's from once you have like a signed contract to when you close. That can change depending on a few factors. One, if you're financing or not. Especially now, banks are taking 45 to 60 days more or less to get a commitment letter. And so if you're buying in a co-op and you're financing, you can't even submit your package to the board until you have your commitment letter. So you've already lost, kind of 2 months there. And then boards often will meet, say, on the third Thursday of every month, or they have 8 weeks to meet. And you have to wait then till they review your package. And then after that, they'll call you for the interview. And then if you're financing, the bank has to re-clear the building and everything else within your file before you can even close. Some buildings will just interview people and review the board packages as they come in, but to be conservative, you definitely want to allow for a number of months. Furthermore, in New York City, regardless of what type of property one is purchasing, our contracts are on or about. We are not a contractual state, meaning as a real estate agent, I do not draw up a contract, which exists in other states throughout our country. You would hire a separate attorney to do that. And furthermore, on or about is 30 days. So your contract date is an on or about 30 days from what's listed, whereas either party can extend for 30 days on top of that.
Whoa.
So you need to also have a broker that will negotiate for your best interest. If you give them a timeline, you want to strategically kind of factor in that 30 days to ensure that your client is lined up where they need to be, also to be able to move in from wherever they were to their new place and have the funds needed for securing the purchase.
That
Wow.
seems really tricky to navigate.
Yeah, it's a lot. And I think that's part of why I love it so much. And I'm sure with all you ladies, like no 2 days are the same. And here in the city, that's absolutely the case. No 2 days are the same. And it's rare even that you end up in the same apartment multiple times over the course of one's career.
So I'm sorry, just real quick, do you attend the co-op meeting with your clients?
That's a wonderful question. Actually, that's not permitted.
Okay.
So it's usually boards are made up of 5 to 8 people. And so sometimes it's with everyone, but usually it's with at least, 2 to 3 board members and then the prospective purchaser. Now, pre-COVID, it always had to be in person. And this was a date, they tell you tomorrow, you're there tomorrow. You cannot say, no, I've got something going on. But since COVID, more of the boards have continued to allow Zoom interviews, which has been wonderful for everyone for a number of different reasons. And it's changed a few other processes pretty significantly in the city, frankly. One of them being that we don't need to hand deliver these board packages where they'd say, make 8 copies for every board member. And I'd have some that were literally 763 pages long. And we would have to waste all of this paper and then, deliver them to these buildings on top of just having to put this package together. So, it was definitely a lot. But to answer your question, Brooke, to go back to that, no, we do not go, but we prep our clients pretty specifically. The harder the board, the more time we would spend with the client to prep them for an interview, because they can come at you with anything and everything. And one of the most important things to be cognizant of is it's not typically a meet and greet. There are some buildings that are a bit more lenient, shall we say. And when you have these interviews, you can tell your client, don't worry, it's a meet and greet. No problem. They're going to love you. Just say hi and, never tell them you want to do anything but paint the apartment, because, you don't want the board president being next door to you when you're doing a gut renovation, right? Tell them after. But for most of the other buildings, your clients really need to be aware of what their finances were like to the penny amounts in their reference letters, recommendations. They're this, they're that. And again, because a few months sometimes passes since they've submitted that package, they need to go back and review it all on top of us giving them different tips to prep them for success. Another odd nuance is that pets also go for interviews in some of these co-ops, believe it or not, which is, a whole thing unto itself, but it just gives you an idea of how unique our marketplace is. I doubt any of you ladies have ever had to deal with that.
No, but that's fascinating, because what happens if you are a home buyer or a co-op participant, or whatever the term is? How would you find someone like yourself? What is the process of finding a realtor that you can trust?
It's a wonderful question. In New York City, people are always like, oh, my friend, my so-and-so, everyone always has someone, which is wonderful. But I always find that people, unfortunately, often just take the recommendation and then later will be like, I'm working with someone, they're never around, or I hired them, I got their assistant. And it really is tricky to navigate that, because it's hard to know what you're getting involved with unless you take the time to diligently do your research to find out whom you're hiring. Now, from a seller's perspective, they are of the mindset, I need to interview an agent, right? They need to know the building. They need to know, specifically the co-op, how to get people through, how to qualify them. And most of the time they'll interview a few brokers to see what's the best fit, who will, market their property, and on what platforms. In this day and age, you need to be on everything. And, are they trustworthy? But with buyers, that's not really the case. Often, someone will meet someone just at an open house, or again, like, hey, my friend, you should go and work with them, take them out, see what happens. And people don't think to interview in the same manner that they would when they're hiring an agent to represent them as a seller. And that's unfortunate. I had mentioned that New York doesn't have an MLS. We also didn't have buyer representation, when you sign a buyer disclosure form, until a number of years ago. It just didn't exist. When I started in this business, I found that very frustrating, because you just had to take everyone's word. And as a new agent, that's tricky. That's hard. You have no guarantee. And not that this gives you a guarantee, because it's not a contract, but it at least is something, showing that you are fiduciarily working with this person and representing them. And, that gives us as agents peace of mind. But to, more specifically answer your question in terms of what, how can someone go about finding an agent that they think they'll mesh the best with, you want to ask for references and credentials. You can also look somebody up on, some of the board state websites to see if they have any ongoing situations, shall we say. So obviously, you wouldn't want to work with someone who is in any open disputes. You want to know their credentials. In New York, we are not allowed to say, they used to give titles like, you're the vice president, you're the president, this, that. They did away with that about 10 years or so ago. And the only way to really differentiate yourself as an agent is to be just a regular sales agent, to have your broker's license, or to get a few different designations that are out there and offered. For instance, I have 2 of them, and there really aren't many. I am a certified negotiation specialist and a buyer's agent rep. And there's not many brokers that take the time to take those additional courses to get these credentials. And that's incredibly important. That sets me apart from a lot of my competition. And unfortunately, not many consumers know, again, that you can ask for this. It's not just you've sold X number of buildings in my area, but you want to know what they can bring to the table. More so in a digital age, what's their marketing strategy? What's their track record for that? Pick up the phone, call the people that they show you as references. And if they don't, ask for some. You're in this relationship for a long time. You want to make it work.
Yeah, that's so true. And it's such an important relationship that you're in. It's one of the biggest purchases, if not the biggest purchase that you're going to make your entire life. And you buy your home, and you're in that home for a long period of time. And I've found that to be true, that sellers seem to take a more proactive role in selecting the right agent than buyers do. I work a lot with first-time home buyers, and they don't really know the questions to ask. So that I enjoy educating them on that. It is kind of a head scratcher that people don't spend the time selecting a good buyer's agent when they're the ones who do most of the heavy lifting.
Absolutely right. And, you want to know their communication skills as well. And often they don't spend enough time just talking with you to realize, is this even going to work? And what's your transparency level as well on that?
I know Regina and her partner, Aaron Brown, they work out of San Antonio. And correct me if I'm wrong, Regina, you guys have talked about your relationship with your clients and prospective clients as being sort of a date. You go on a date with them to get to know each other and see if you do communicate well together.
Yeah, we do. We meet every client together the very first. And we, especially on the buyer side, we spend so much time with our clients that most of the time they turn into friends. They end up referring their family, their friends to us. And so, yeah, the relationship aspect of it is very important to us, because where we are so referral based, they're referring their friends, their family to us. If they're the kind of people we want to work with, we definitely nurture that relationship for sure.
I love everything you're saying, Regina. That's one of my team's big, major pushing points here. We want to know that we have sold everyone in their family an apartment, and then all of their friends. You know,
Yes.
what's best for them is best for us, even if that means they change their mind halfway through the process of selling their apartment because the market's changing. We tell them, you know what, your best interest is to rent right now. We want to give them the best advice and nurture that relationship to make sure they come back. And it's interesting. It's not the same with many agents. They are not about that connection.
It's the one, we call it one and done.
Yeah, I love that. That's wonderful.
So this whole no MLS thing is throwing me for a loop.
Yes.
I
Yes.
just can't even quite
That's-
I don't even know what to ask you about that because I can't wrap my mind around it. So how are properties listed?
It's a wonderful question. And just so you know, I get this all the time. I work, I do so much referral business, and it's always interesting to hear from other agents how how do you navigate? Can you tell us? I would lose my head there. So we do have, say, a faux MLS, but that doesn't mean everyone is participatory. And for instance, areas, say, on the outskirts of Brooklyn, everyone considers it the Wild West because people won't even co-broke out there, which is just nasty in my opinion. We're here to work with one another to get deals done, and we shouldn't be selfish enough not to want to do what's best for our customer. So what happens with most of the largest firms, everyone is, they're members of the National Association of Realtors, and or in New York specifically, if they're not, Real Estate Board of New York, which is REBNY for short. So most of the large firms and many agents are members of this group. And as such, we have a faux MLS that's called OLR, and we put all of our listings in our system, and it gets distributed out, to about 30 to 40 other websites, including, those of other agencies. So,
And is that New York specific?
yes, yeah,
Okay.
New York, Brooklyn, the tri-state area, like around us, basically, I would say. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So everything can be found on there. But again, depending if you're out in these outskirts of Brooklyn, which really isn't that far, you're not going to find that, nor are you going to find someone that's going to want to work with you. And that's very hard for a customer. And so sometimes we have to tell the customer, we can't really help you. You're better off going to them directly. And I know that sounds horrible, but they won't co-broke with us. Mm-hmm. And that's a really hard conversation to have in this day and age, especially when someone wants representation and help negotiating as well.
So what if you have help negotiating and you think that you are with the perfect broker, and then you find out that maybe they're not doing anything for you, and you wish that you had somebody like yourself instead? How do you end that relationship and then move on?
Wonderful question. So back to Regina, she said, one and done. It's like dating. You got to make that break. And it's not easy. Some people really, they want to make things work, right? They're fixers. And it's hard sometimes for people to realize not just, okay, something's wrong here, but to take the actual steps to get out of a toxic relationship, like dating, truly. So, the best thing I could advise someone is, first, see if you can fix whatever is going on, right? If it's a communication issue, maybe try and explain how you like to be communicated with and what you can expect, and try and get everyone's expectations and communication skills all on the same page so you can move forward jointly. If that's not possible, or if you've already surpassed it, the best thing you can do is to do your homework this time around and research an agent that hopefully you can connect with, who you feel comfortable working with, who you can specifically give them a list of the concerns and issues you had with the previous broker and say, these were my problems. How would you work through this? Or how do you work in these situations, to see if you are all going to be on the same page moving forward? Since we don't have a contractual buyer's agency here, for instance, right? If you have a listing agreement, that's contractual. We only have an agency disclosure form as a buyer. So, it's not contractual based in terms of money or anything like that. So it is easier here to cut your ties and move on than it is if you're a seller having to get out of a listing agreement, which can be a little bit more problematic. But at the end of the day, depending on how high things escalate, you may need to get a management and higher up involved, unfortunately. And I would just say, if that doesn't work, it's best to try and find someone who has the communication, the skills, and in the history of performing in a market, that niche market that you want to purchase in.
And that's great advice for a client. Now, we're talking today about red flags working with real estate professionals who aren't professional. So what do you do when, let's say, you're the listing agent and you're working with a buyer's agent who is not performing and not representing their client in the best possible way, or you're just finding red flags there? Have you had that experience, and what can you share with us?
Yeah.
Haven't we all?
Right. I mean, first of all, I feel horrible and helpless to a degree, because there is that professional line where you can't cross too much between the relationship between, said customer and the other broker that everyone's having an issue with, because you have to some degree, be respectful of the relationship that's already there. That being said, I've definitely gotten a lot of business from being a professional throughout a transaction where that other client comes to me later because they saw how well I performed and how much I carried myself. So for anyone starting out in the business, and just frankly anyone, I would say it doesn't matter who's across from you. And that's in any type of relationship within that transaction, whether it's the lender, whether it's the payoff bank, your attorney, the buyer, the seller, whomever. Be the professional, because you never know what's going to come out of it. And sometimes that means doing double duty. And what I mean by that is taking the workload from the other side onto your shoulders to get the transaction done. And I did that recently. We had a situation where I represented a seller, and the buyer and her broker, it became very clear early on, it was not a good relationship. And we tried very hard to take over all of that workload, which again, we had to do that whole board package, frankly, which that agent should have done for his client to ensure our seller got the deal done, right? So we did the right thing for the seller by taking on the additional workload. And we also, saved the transaction because we did that. I had numerous conversations, as I, would advise anyone to do when you're dealing with an agent on the other side of that table who's not cooperating, whether it's just a full lack of, unprofessionalism, or they're not doing things in a timely manner because we have, timelines that things need to be done within. Whatever the issue is, try to get them to be on your side. I've found over the years when we've had, for instance, like up and down market cycles, usually in those bad markets where agents have to work extra hard, and I'm sure you ladies know the markets I'm talking about, to get a deal done. The first thing I say to the person on the other side when we start to negotiate is, listen, no one is going to win here. Everyone has to give. We need to make this work. So we need to work together now more than ever. Do you think we can do that? And I say that right up front because I want to set the tone for what's to come. And of course, I'm happy to do the other work, but I want to try to make sure that I don't. And I want to preserve the relationship and have a good transaction. So unfortunately, yes, these things happen. And I would say try to communicate and remember that someone is always watching. And if you do what's right, people will notice. And they'll come back.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think sometimes when you're working with an agent who isn't necessarily a delight to work with, they're still learning, and your professionalism can help them in the long run to be better in their career and to better serve their clients in the future. So I agree that it is always important to try and come with a mindset of giving to all of the parties involved and trying to get the deal complete.
Well, I loved your question, Brooke, but my question is, are there warning signs that lets you know that a real estate agent is incompetent or is unable to actually carry through on the promises that they've made?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things I notice is just a lack of responsivity. If you're asking for things, even if it's as simple as basic showings, and they're just not responding whatsoever, that's a really bad sign. They are not doing their job right. They could care less, and it's going to be a lot more for you. There's also, the ones that are incredibly pushy and dig in and ask all these questions that, ethically they probably really shouldn't be asking. These are major red flags as far as I'm concerned. Also, sometimes when you go on showings, the way that the full lack of professionalism sometimes comes through when you watch someone show their property to you and your client, or they're totally dismissive. I took a client in to look at a $20,000 rental yesterday. We walked into the building. The broker wasn't there yet. They wouldn't let us stand in the building. in the lobby. My for $20,000 a month, right? Client's like, forget it. Like, this is not happening.
What was the reason for you not standing in the building?
There was none given, just that we weren't eligible to stand there. Yeah,
You
horrible.
weren't welcome.
We weren't well. It was very clear. Like, we were not. There's 2 couches. We are not welcome. We had to sit outside. And like the broker didn't apologize, didn't say anything. We told them like nothing, just like, oh yeah, this is just like a regular occurrence. It's like, well, okay, great.
Could that have been noted up front? Just say, hey, listen, there's this weird policy in this building. You don't get to sit down. You don't get to stand. No walking, no standing, no looking. You got to stand outside. I mean, like, had you been prepped for it, would it have made the blow easier?
Totally. I mean, he could have said, listen, I'll meet you out front. And not even told us that the staff was going to be
yeah. Got it.
Could have even done that, but no. And it wasn't even, hey, I'm running late. It was nothing. And so we just had to stand outside. And then when I said something, he also didn't try to apologize for the behavior at all, which led us, further to believe like this is not a building that I would ever want to place a client in.
Not only that, but if that's how you're treated as a buyer, how are their guests going to feel if their guests come to visit them?
For sure.
Great point. That's a great point.
I mean, I'm not to be ugly or anything, but I myself would have walked out on that deal. I would have said, oh, if I'm not welcome here, let me show you how welcome I'm not. I'll take my business elsewhere. Right.
Exactly.
And I'm not that kind of person, but I wouldn't have favored that.
Yeah. And that's what my client said. He's like, absolutely not. He's like, I don't want to come home to this every day. I would never want anyone to come visit me or anything. Yeah. But you landed on a really good other point. It's about expectations. And that's a really good way to kind of tell what you're in store for. What are the expectations? How are these other agents that you're working with? How do they treat you from your initial conversation? And again, if he had said something, great, no problem. We understand. But he didn't, and it made it all the worse. So it is definitely, expectations and communication, which is, main skills here for real estate agents. If they're lacking, these are red flags of what's to come for sure.
Well, and I love the way that you couch that by saying, hey, I'll meet you out front. Or he could have said something that would have eased the pain that said, for security reasons, we want to take extra care to make sure that people who are unauthorized to be in the building are in there. So for this first initial meeting, we're going to ask you to stand outside until you're on the inside and you're one of us, right? And then I would have said, oh, okay, so it's kind of like privileged, like it's a gated community kind of a thing. Absolutely. And then it would have been different as far as the purchaser coming in, where they were just like, you're on the outside, get outside, right? You're not welcome here. That's a whole different kind of message.
100%. Listen, we're in sales. We can sell anything, right? They should have sold us on that to begin with.
Right.
Right. The presentation of it. And so in our MLS, we do have in North Carolina, part of that built in is how we schedule showings of a property. Mm-hmm. And I'm not sure how you all do that there, but as part of that process, once you do show a property, then you're sent a feedback form. So if I were to show a listing that you have, after the showing is complete, then I'm requested to provide my feedback on that. And that's a good tool that we have that provides transparency of what our clients felt about the price of the property. Does it need to be staged? Did it smell like cigarette smoke? Did it, whatever issues you have. And then also you could put in there something like that. Well, the agent wouldn't let us in the building. So then the client selling the home can see maybe that their agent isn't performing for them. Do you all have any tools like that?
It's a wonderful question. So interestingly enough, I do exactly that. I have a huge feedback tracker Excel sheet for every single property that we list, every year basically. And we put everyone's information, even if they haven't seen it, but they've sent an email or had a call. We put as much information on, said consumer as possible. And for those who come through, we ask for feedback and we share that with our sellers. Now that's not commonly done here, unfortunately. I wish it was for all of my clients. They find it incredibly valuable, but I'm rarely asked to give the same request at all. Like it doesn't happen. And it's unfortunate, I think.
Yeah, it's a great tool and it's great transparency.
Yeah, I've had numerous clients, especially this one. I think I was telling you earlier when we started this conversation, we're trying to get in and he just hasn't let us in to view this apartment. He's given us like 8 p.m. at night and, just the most random times that no one could ever see it. And my client, who is going to be a seller but is now looking to buy before they, sell their home, is like, I would never hire this person. Can I tell the owner, like, how do I get feedback to the owner that their client, their customer, their agent, is doing a horrible job representing their interests? And that's the hard truth, is it's very hard to let the other person, know that the agent they've hired to sell what's arguably one of, that's not representing them correctly.
We're having a little technical difficulty. So, Adie, what do you do in a situation like that? Do you reach out to the brokerage firm?
Unfortunately, not, unless it's an escalated problem, which I have had to deal with, before. Unfortunately, not tons of times, but there have definitely been a handful of times where I have made it known. I'm at Compass currently, and Compass does ask for your opinions on other agents, especially when you're doing transactions, which I think is very helpful because they want to grow, our brokerage with similar type-minded agents. And so they want to know, who's good, who's not. And if you've had issues, what were those, so that we can kind of pass that around. I will say that while there are thousands of agents in New York City, those that do the most business is a much smaller percentage, right? And so word does travel. With co-ops, and what they require, and as well as with agents and who you really want to work with. So unfortunately, sometimes you just have to deal with them if they're representing something, but it is always, I think, helpful to relay the information so that others can be either better prepared or to stay as wide a berth as possible. Unfortunately, getting to an owner is sometimes difficult, though.
Is it a small community? I'm sorry, Angela.
No, I was going to say, I know that on the cleaning side, that network is also key to us because there are agents that we won't work with just because of the shenanigans, or they don't return the calls, or they're hard to get in touch with, or they say the home will be available at a certain time and you go to clean at a certain time. And then of course it's locked, or the power has already been cut off, or the water's been cut off, or whatever the weird things are. And then you expect that you're going to get in and do your job and you're unable to do that. So the network of knowing who you can work with and who you can't work with is also paramount, even from other people like service providers like myself.
Absolutely.
Yeah, reputation is really important.
It absolutely is.
Is your network small, the real estate agents in New York? I mean, I know it's so many people there, but do you find that you work with the same agents over and over again?
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of repetitiveness for sure, especially when you've been doing it for as long as I have. Even if you haven't done a deal with X, usually they know your name, their brand, or something like that because you've had so much market share. Hopefully you're a reputable broker, so the name comes across as well. Like I met someone out in the Hamptons at SoulCycle 2 weeks ago, and he's like, "Oh, I know. Yeah, I met you. You showed like my client this apartment. You were one of the best agents." It was just so great to get the feedback. He thought he had a wonderful experience with me. I couldn't, identify him from Adam, but that's not the point. The point is, word gets around and reputations do. And if you, are going into a deal with someone, you want to know who's on your other side. And it's helpful, to know that they hopefully are a accredited agent with, a really professional track record.
So how do you find those agents? If I'm a seller, how do I find that agent that's really going to shine for me?
Great question. Thank you so much for asking. So how do you find the agent that's going to shine for you? Well, definitely a few things to look for, at least in our marketplace, right? New York and Brooklyn, like they're huge areas. We have many micro, niche neighborhoods within that. So ideally someone who specializes in, whether it's, say, your property type or your building or your area, something, a bit insular as opposed to, wider. You want a team that has a good track record. But more than anything, what I find is incredibly important, and I say this from a stance of taking over listings from other agents, is you want to spend the time, and we've discussed this earlier, interviewing the person you're going to hire. You want to know how they work. You want to know their credentials. You want to reach out to the references that they supply you with to not just accept the written text, but to find out how that transaction went. How is it working with this other person? How did they communicate with you, etc. You can go online and get recommendations, but it's not like a Yelp type thing, right? We're realtors. It's a little, more challenging, but you want to find out how someone fundamentally is going to work and communicate with you, because it is the dating scene. You are in this relationship for a long time. And more than anything in our marketplace, more and more agents are part of teams. And listen, I have a team. There's nothing wrong with that. But each team operates slightly differently. So if you are hiring an agent that's on a team, I always advise people, find out who you will be working with. Because often the person who comes to your house and looks at your home may not be the one that you are interacting with on a daily basis, who's showing your home, who's giving you feedback. You want to know how they're marketing it. I advise not just getting their numbers, but having them break it all down for you. Mm-hmm. And depending on the home that you have, and I've had a couple people do this to me, and on the flip side, I've done it for a couple of clients when I've met them, is how would you show my home? And I don't think enough people do that. And I think it's really important, because they should be able, like on a dime, to come in there and know your property. And again, this is New York. So, it's not a home. We don't have to, unfortunately, homes, 12,000 square feet is not, all over the place. So walk them through the home. How would they do a tour? How would they interact with you? What would they point out? And if they can do that on a dime and really kind of hit it right, you have a start to a really good relationship. And now you just need to look at the other things, the other minute points. I just don't think enough people do that. And you want to know how your home's going to be represented on top of how they're going to communicate with you, what their expectations are, how they're going to market your home, what their specialties are, and how they'll push your property out there and interact with the public.
If you are on the seller side and you're interviewing the agent, do you tell them at the time, I think we're a good fit, or I don't think we're a good fit? Do you tell them at the time what the outcome of that is?
It's a wonderful question. And I think that varies personality to personality, right? I think I'm a big believer in the DISC profile, and I like to identify people right up front. And I think there's definitely some people who get comfort also in letting the person in front of them who they're interviewing know that this is going to work. Well, there's a whole other set who needs to kind of sit back, take in all the information they've got, and review it all before they can come to that decision. So in my opinion, there is no right answer to that. But I also will tell you, as an agent going in, I ask before I show up, how many agents are you interviewing?
That's good.
That's a great question.
I come last, because I want to either set the tone or be the last one there to leave an impression and to answer all the questions the other agents might not have been able to answer, or to reiterate how I would do something that, say, the seller didn't feel comfortable that this other agent had mentioned, right? Like, what would you do in this instance? So-and-so said they would do this. How would you handle that situation? So I like to take the situation into my own hands.
I love that.
Well,
you said it's the Wild West there in Brooklyn. So I'm curious, do you have the same process for every single type of property? Or do you have to kind of be like a chameleon and kind of, ebb and flow with the different properties and the different personalities that you're working with?
Wonderful question. You definitely need to ebb and flow, right? No two people are the same. I believe, not in the golden rule, but the platinum rule. Like, treat others as they want to be treated, not as you want to be treated, as they want to be treated. And know your audience, right? It's kind of like sales 101. If you can talk to the other person, then you need to be that chameleon, because they are going to retain information differently, most likely, than, the other three people you just met with. So you need to be able, in my opinion, as a sales agent, to change your skills and how you present those skills, not the actual skills, but how you present them to your audience, because your audience is going to change and you need to be relatable and you need to get the same message across, and that delivery may need to be somewhat edited depending on whom you're talking with.
That's great advice. I think so many realtors do spend a lot of time being aware of the market trends, what's going on in their market, but maybe not enough time in honing their interpersonal skills, their communication skills. And those change so rapidly. They've changed since COVID with, like we discussed, being on Zoom calls rather than face-to-face. You having to communicate with co-op boards or, in commercial real estate. Those are really vital skills. And one question that brings me to is, in my mind, I'm from the South, where things are real slow. And in my mind, it's really aggressive in New York. Do you find that you work with a lot of agents who are really aggressive, fast-paced, just a little more robust in their negotiations than maybe other parts of the country?
I would say yes. I would say I'm also probably that person. So maybe you don't like me either. But
no. I'm not saying I don't like it. I'm not saying I don't like it. I have a lot of respect for that. That's just not my approach. I don't have that skill set.
Different personality types, right?
Personality types, exactly. I'm definitely like a very straightforward person and a strong negotiator, but that doesn't mean I wouldn't say slow down my tone or the way I would get to the end goal, dealing with an agent that is not just like me, that is maybe calmer, slower, or even newer in the business, right? Because at the end of the day, I want to do what's best for my client. And I need to be able to get to that end point. I need to know my audience. And by audience, I mean, it's not necessarily my customer. The audience could be the other broker or their customer, that they're bringing in, say, to view one of my properties. So you always need to adjust. But yes, there is definitely, I'd also say, like a stigma to your point that New York is very fast paced. People are very demanding. Not everyone is, but that definitely is out there. And there's been some occasions where I've had to tell the other agent a few times, unfortunately. And again, it comes down to communication. Like, I'm sorry, have I done something wrong? Because they'll just come across so harsh and mean sometimes. And they just need a reality check, because I'm sure maybe I do too sometimes. But, if you're ever off on the wrong foot, I always think it's good to kind of hash it out. Like, stop. And what's going on? How can we get beyond this? As if one person's offended the other person some way, let's clear the air so that we can all move on and do what's, right for our customers and get things done, whether that's simple as access to a property or it's something on the table in terms of negotiating, because people are different and they work different, and you never know also what else may be going on in someone's life that,
Absolutely.
We have so many people. I'm sorry, we have so many people moving from the New York area to the Carolinas, and so changing the way I communicate with, I've worked with very many buyers who are moving from the Northeast to the South, and just adjusting the way I communicate into a way that they feel more comfortable with has been fundamental.
Yeah.
Do you put yourself on high speed dub, Brooke?
I probably shouldn't I? And I don't think I sound Southern, but they do. They think I sound very Southern. So sometimes I play it up, and sometimes I try to drop my y'alls a little bit.
That's funny.
Angela, I'm sorry. You were starting to say something?
Adie was mentioning how she drops the communication by saying, I understand that there's a concern here that we were on the same page and now we're not. What happened? And I'm a lot like Adie in the really fast pace. Don't waste my time. I've got a lot of stuff to get done. Let's just get to it. But I found that being in the South, I've had to slow that down, and I've had to take responsibility myself. Like, hey, we were on the same page there for a minute and everything was going swimmingly. And suddenly I find myself at odds with the conversation or the energy, and I make it be my fault. And then I say, is it something that I said, or am I the one that just went off the rails? And oftentimes they'll say, no, it's not you. It's actually the situation. And I've had clients, because in the house cleaning industry, we're having conversations with customers all the time. But I find you can start a relationship really well, and then it does go off the rails. And so for me, I take full responsibility and I say, is it something I did or something I said? And then I stop and I try to bring myself back to a southern place where they take their own sweet time. But a lot of times they'll say, oh no, my father is dying, and I'm just really stressed out right now. It has nothing to do with this relationship at all. Oh, good. Are we okay then? You and me, we're good, right? And reaffirm that so that then we can continue to move on. Because if we're not on the same page, and I did go off the rails, help me get back, like what's happening here? Or is this where we part ways as friends? And I've always asked people that question, is this where we part ways as friends? Because I value the relationship as friends more than I do the business relationship. And so if we can part ways as friends, sometimes they'll still send me referrals. But I've ended relationships midway where we have gone off the rails and there's no getting it back. We can't patch this up. And so instead of saying it's all your fault, when of course it's all their fault, then I say to myself, it's my fault. I did something that made you uncomfortable and I apologize for that. So if we can't repair that, I would like for us to part ways as friends.
Well, and that's a great approach to it, Adie. I'm sure
Yes.
you see this, and you too, Regina, that in a real estate transaction, you have so many moving parts, and people are, the sellers feeling pressure to sell, and you're dealing with home inspectors and lenders and title companies, and you're dealing with all of these different moving parts that are putting pressure on you. So when you're speaking with someone who knows what conversation they just had, and they're bringing that energy into their conversation with you, and it's very often not about what the two of you are discussing, but all of the other aspects of the transaction.
And I think your point, both of you, it's also a level of professionalism for someone to, stop the conversation, take a step back, and want to address whatever may be going on. Those are also the people that I usually end up, God forbid it happens, but we build a strong bond normally, unless we part ways, because we've taken that time out. And again, normally it is something else that's going on. And then, you may have empathy or compassion for their situation as well, which brings you ultimately closer sometimes in the end.
Absolutely.
Well,
Definitely.
I like what Adie said about having to negotiate the contracts for these co-ops, and there's all this inner stuff that has to happen, and you got to hire somebody else that writes the contracts. And I would love for somebody to come in and say, hey, listen, you're probably in the process of searching through a whole bunch of different realtors to use, and I would like for you to choose us, and here's the reason why. And she made it very clear. I've been in the industry for so long. I have the relationships with the person that's going to write your contract, and I know the co-op, and I know the board, and I know the building, and I know the area, and here I'm the reason that you should hire me, because I have all these different facets that probably another agent may not have. And so instead of you having to go out and find each of those individual relationships, trust me, I've got a whole team of people that can come help you with this process and make it easy and effortless for you. I love that. I love that. And I'm curious, how is it that somebody that has not been through that process before, how do they find you, and how do they get all the goods from all of your expertise and your knowledge and your wisdom and years of experience?
Well, thank you for asking. I mean, I would hope that any buyer out there, or seller, landlord, tenant, does their research. It's one of the ways that I think our industry can continue to improve its reputation, is because people take the time to find professionals that share some of the same ideology that we've all just discussed on this call. And I think the best ways to do that is to go online and to look, first of all, right? I know everyone says, like, start your home search online. You start your dating online now. Start finding your realtor online. Read the recommendations that people have written for others. Then take it a step further. And again, in our marketplace, we can break those areas down to different types of buildings and neighborhoods you may want to pursue. So you want to hone in on someone that will help you the best to navigate these complex market nuances, who has a one-stop shop for everything, no matter what side of the coin you're on, right? If I represent a seller, I have a painter or a contractor, and 3 recommendations is my limit for each, minimum rather, a window cleaner, a regular cleaner, even a massage therapist to come in. I mean, like, you name it, a marble person, a this, as that, everything. But then if you're on the buy side, I have all the other things that you would need from a buyer's perspective, to connect someone and to succeed, right? You want to succeed no matter what it is. And this is probably one, if not, your largest financial decisions. And why wouldn't you want to take the time to do the research? Don't just go out and start looking at properties. Like, that's great. And if you want to do that, okay. But before you make that decision as to whom to hire to represent you, do your research, ask around, again, 3 is my magic number, get 3 recommendations. Talk to them, interview them as if you were being interviewed yourself for a position to fill. See how they respond, how they want to communicate, and what you also feel, because there is that, connection. And you definitely want to pay attention to how you feel about someone. And listen, you can find me, NYC Experience Team here in New York, also on Instagram, on Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, you name it, NYC Experience Team, or just myself at Adie Kriegstein, across all the platforms, same name.
Well, this has been really great information, and I love that that you've got insight for your clients and being able to determine who's a good realtor for you to work with, and also as a real estate agent and working with other agents and how to navigate those waters, because they can be pretty choppy. And I just the market that you work in, I just can't even imagine. No MLS, no buyer agency. Or no co-brokerage. Good for you for 18 years.
So to put that in perspective, Angela, that's like trying to clean a house without any household cleaners. It takes a lot of innovation and creativity for sure.
Well, my mind is spinning, because from the cleaning perspective, I'm thinking to myself, how would you get a job if you were a house cleaner? How would you get a job on the inside of a co-op? Like, it's hard enough working with a realtor, because like if you have a move in, move out clean, what you have is you have someone who's selling their home, right? We have to get that home ready to sell. And so what you're dealing with is you're dealing with the homeowner and you're dealing with their realtor. Then you're dealing with the buyer and you're dealing with their realtor. And so now you have like 4 bosses. And they're all giving you different directives. And so one of the things for us is we have to ask, who is my boss? Like, who is writing the paycheck on this move in, move out clean? Because I don't want to have conversations with the other 3 parties, because it just gets really confusing and convoluted, right? And so who is my boss? But what happens if you're in a co-op and you've got like people that won't even let you in the building? How does that work? My head is just spinning with questions. I'm not going to sleep tonight.
Right. And how did you learn that whole process? How did you learn to sell a co-op? Did you learn at the feet of somebody else who had that experience?
Wonderful question. So I got into the real estate straight out of school. And at that time, teams were actually incredibly frowned upon. I don't know if that was the same in the rest of the country, but you can't go someplace now and not join a team. Like, they make you join a team. But that wasn't the case when I became an agent. So I literally took it as a sink or swim. Any agent in my office who needed help, I was there. I would do it for free. Obviously, it was great if I got paid, but I wanted the experience. So I just threw myself in. Also, there was no real training. Again, that's not what's done now. Most brokerages have, in-house training, like Compass Academy, for instance. And that was not the case when I joined. So I took it upon myself to attend any type of educational lecture or, whatever that was going on, that was being offered. So again, like for instance, we don't have an MLS, but we have Revenue Real Estate Board of New York. They have a huge calendar of different things that they would offer. So I went to all the different talks as well. And I took additional courses at the time to help me become a better realtor. But ultimately, to learn how to do co-ops and to learn how to do them well, it takes time. You have to do it again and again. Just board packages. I'm still learning how to make a better board package. There's always something that you can learn from someone else. At least that's my mindset. So, if you're doing a package with someone, figure out what that thing is that will help you make a better package next time around. And more than anything, work with someone, especially to help train you. And if that means you have to grovel at their feet and take on, all of the small jobs, you do that, because that's how you're going to succeed ultimately. You just have to have the experience.
Well, education is so important. And I want to thank you for all of the great information you shared with us today. And I want to thank you for representing our profession so brilliantly. And I like Angela, I would love to have you back because I have a million questions going through my mind. So thank you for that. We'll go around and say goodbye. Adie, if you'll tell everybody where they can find you.
Yep, I'm Adie Kriegstein, so that's A. Kriegstein. In addition to NYC Experience Team, you can find us. That's our website, as well as Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, and Instagram. I would love to hear from everyone, and thank you for having me. This has been wonderful.
It has been wonderful. Thanks. And Regina, would you please tell everybody in our audience where they can find you?
Yes, on all the social medias at Regina B. Realty.
Thanks so much. And Angela?
I want to say thank you. I'm Ask Angela Brown on all the social medias, and I want to say thank you to those of you that joined us today. Thank you, Priscilla, for your kind words. You say this is a fantastic info. Thank you. Thank you for joining us today. Without you, we have no show. So thank you. I appreciate your time and attention today. Thank you, Brooke, for having me here.
It was great having you. I am Brooke Bryant out of Charlotte, North Carolina. You can find me on all the social media platforms at Ask Brooke Bryant. And if Adie has sold your house and you're looking to move to the Carolinas, give me a call. I'll be glad to slowly show you around. And it's great to see everybody. And we look forward to seeing everybody next time. Thanks so much.